probably got. So I'm going to invite Laveena now to turn her camera on, as I can see her. And yeah, so you're live in VR, you're live in AR, and we have to create some new letters. A wonderful chat, and great to have you as part of the Q&A.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the conference, the organizers. I hope you liked my talk, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions now.
I better get over to the question board. So yeah, so the first one, which I don't actually know the answer for, so I'm actually looking forward to actually getting the answers for all of these questions. So Monica asks, do you create prototypes to test these models?
So we don't really have like prototypes, but we basically try and make it as realistic as possible by using our client data. We can't really use the client data directly, so we have to anonymize. And my latest task actually is to create a golden data set to actually add the high-risk features into this golden data set and use it as a type of a prototype to actually run the model end to end. So we don't really have prototypes as such, but we are trying to make it via this data set. I hope that explains the type of prototype that I'm going to use in the new year, actually. So I hope I've answered Monica's question.
No, absolutely. And I guess, you know, the golden data set is something that we're always you know, chasing after and going to kind of, which is a set which we can always use. And I think test data is definitely the final frontier, and you know, it's something that we're, you know, Paul, who's on day 3 chairing, you know, we've been having lots of different conversations around. So the next question that's come in again from Monica, and she's just said thank you to Laveena as well, but so do you work alongside data analysts or test analysts to check that the model is okay?
Yes, so we are a typical SDLC team. I pair a lot with the data scientists. I get quite confused because the model actually has so many algorithms that I need to understand the new features they're working on. How is it actually impacting the model? How can I test it better? So I always constantly need to ping them on Slack and be like, can we have a quick call? I need to understand what we're trying to do, because I need to write some test cases and scenarios to be able to test it accurately. So I would suggest, if you're working close to data scientists, you're in a better position. If not, it can be a bit confusing, and you might lose a nugget of information that might have been vital for you to actually test a new implementation and gain more confidence around it.
Oh, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so another question that's kind of come in, just the last one that's come in actually from Raymond Wills. He said, would you evaluate the model quality by streaming data through the AI model and comparing it with traditional analytics on the output?
Okay, so the model we are using is not an AI model, it's pure data science. But the way we were doing it is similar to what you had said. So we were using Tableau to do the analysis previously. What we've done now is we've converted that Tableau into our in-house Tableau that only adds information into there that we really need, all the graphs, all the pie charts. So we've tried to create a similar thing to Tableau to do our analysis. And then with data scientists, if there's something that we can't really test on the front end, we try and work with them via the back end and see how we can test that locally, and again, gain confidence in what we are trying to do. I would suggest, sometimes, you know, there's tickets which are very, very technical, and sometimes developers might tell you that this is not easy to test. I'm sure there's a way to test it, and find a way, be there for it, because it's really tricky when you're trying to release and when you're trying to do a regression test, that same issue comes up and you couldn't test it. So just be there all the time, be alert, and make sure you ask as many questions, and whether it's to do with analysis or the backend style testing, make sure that you understand it fully.
I
You
think
need to
that's
remember,
great.
sorry?
I think that's a great tip. I know
Yeah,
you covered we covered a podcast which actually got released this week, and part of it was the domain expertise, right? It was the understanding of your domain, whichever you're in. So I know this. I know for a lot of the people out there are probably thinking this is a really hard conversation, but I guess leading on from kind of what Theo was saying at the start of the day is part of it is the human interaction in this is understanding your domain. So if you're in healthcare like Chris is, part of it is you kind of start seeing from patterns in the data based on what you expect should be there, right? And
100%.
and I know one of the other questions that's come in is from Prateek, is around what would be the first steps for a tester to start learning kind of data science. Do you have any kind of tips for that for Prateek?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. I get asked that a lot. I thought I might have to do some data science course when I joined the team. And actually, no, not really. What you need to do is bring your testing skills with you because you will really need those. And in terms of data science, I would suggest a read up on some material. The best thing I think that has been for me is learn on the job with the data scientists themselves, because it just helps understand your data. It helps you put yourself in the user's point of view. If you are not understanding it, how do you expect the user to understand it, your client? So it's useful to read up a little bit to just understand what data science is and how those algorithms and structures actually work. But at the same time, you will be testing and you'll be bringing your testing experience, which will be actually enough. So it all depends. As I've heard that some teams actually work as an STLC and then data scientists sit in a separate team. If you can try and merge those together, because that's more useful and it adds more value actually, because as testers, we understand things better that way. So I would suggest read up, pair a lot with data scientists as well as developers as well. And if you've got a front end, make sure all three are combined so they can interact with each other. Sometimes what I've noticed quite a lot is we've got a feature going in for the model side of things, but they've forgotten about the front end. So I've tested half of it, and when I'm trying to complete and I'm thinking, there's an API endpoint missing here because I can't really understand what the front end is doing. So just be a bit more alert around the dependencies as well.
Yeah, and I think that probably leads us on to Chris's question. I'll just see if I can find Chris. Oh, he's over here, loitering. So yeah, Chris was kind of asking, do you have any tips for dealing with kind of random data or generating random data or randomness of that kind of data set?
Yes. So one thing I wanted to just mention, models don't have to be random. My model is stochastic because it's using predictive analytics. Um, to deal with randomness, you need to understand which stage in your model that randomness is happening. If it's happening in that stage, why is it happening? And what's the reason behind it? So can we accept it or can we not accept it? So don't ever be worried why if I run the model twice, it's different first time, different second time. Don't worry at all. You just need to add thresholds to make sure that your result is not very, very deviated. That's what I would suggest. We've added a threshold of 3 to 5%, but if your business is very critical, like say, for example, credit card fraud, you might want to keep the threshold to the very minimal. So like a change or deviation between 0.5 to 1% only is what you're going to accept. So it's super important that you don't get worried with the randomness. It's expected in some models if you're working with stochastic models, but there's a way to handle it. We handled it with thresholds because I was the one getting very confused, and I said, there needs to be something for us to actually understand this. So now actually I am doing a release test right now, and I was just checking, is this between the 5% or above? So yeah, and if it is above your threshold, all you need to do is understand why this happened. It could be one of your configurations. So sometimes there are certain configurations which might deviate your results a bit more. and there are certain configurations that might not deviate your results. At the same time, what you're doing is you're doing performance testing here as well, because you might want to see your model's taking too long, or it's gone too quick. So it's a kind of a conversation to have with your data scientists.
Yeah, I love that. And so we've been helping a customer with building an AI as a service and using computer vision. And the idea behind it was it takes lots of photos of clothing and it identifies them, whether it's a particular style of clothing. Now, what we realized is that actually something that we don't really think about much when we come to this kind of stuff is and also, but I guess we have non-functional requirements for a reason, but we kind of worked and it's in the bug which I've done last month around gated as a goal of what you're trying to achieve, an acceptance or a tolerance, which is kind of what you're talking about there. The transforms that are required for the data, transform the data into something that is usable, and then E is around enhancing that data, and then D being the actual data sets itself and what you use to train at certain points. So you don't use the same data for each stages. You always keep a bit separate for for validation or later position. So it's really interesting because we had an incident where we had to recognize 10,000 products per day. And one of the algorithms was really good at doing that, in the sense of it got to kind of the 80% mark we were trying to look for. And then unfortunately, but the amount of compute time was minutes instead of seconds. So we ended up realizing that actually the scale couldn't possibly work for us, because it would potentially cost a lot more to scale up the architecture to be able to support the additional compute power to just get an extra couple of percentage increase in being able to be better recognition. So, I think it's really great to have testers involved in this, and I know it feels like it's a scary subject for a lot of people. I like the question that's come in from Raymond at the back, which says, I've not heard this expression before, but is there a danger of throwing out the baby with the bathwater? To kind of say, and I do see this quite a lot, where people kind of, oh, well, we need an AI, where actually maybe they don't need an AI. They just need an analytical model which has already, been proven to do this, whether it's, one thing or another. So do you find that is a problem as well?
Yeah, sometimes I think as a team, sometimes I might suggest something and I'm walking 10 steps ahead and I get pushed back, like, no, this is not priority right now. So let's just focus on making the product more stable. So yes, I would suggest, I agree with that. But I'm sure you can enhance your product and make it much more better in the future. But it's always good, I've thought, to maybe think a bit ahead and then see what the team thinks. At least the seed is there, then you can let it grow whenever. But yeah, I mean, I'm very talkative in the team. I mention a lot of things that might be useful, maybe not at that point, but at least they've been mentioned. So yeah, I think we can be very optimistic, but there's nothing wrong in that. The worst is you're going to get, yeah, it's not priority right now, but at least you spoke about it.
No, I like that, and I like the fact that there's this level of communication that needs to be done, or really kind of linked into Prateek's next question, which was around, if it's not testable, does that mean it's not very coded well? And I know we covered this in a keynote which Wozniak did quite recently, where he's kind of saying that actually at Apple, if you couldn't explain the AI or the model that was used wasn't explainable, then they wouldn't class it as a feature, because it has to be explainable. Yes. From an AI perspective, or even a data from an analytics perspective. So yes, this idea of having to be able to explain it and in natural English or language is really important, I think. So, do you find that actually, some things aren't testable just because they're not developed well, or is this kind of a balance, really?
I think it gives me chills when I'm in a planning session and a developer says, this is not testable. And I'm thinking, right, I need to ping him separately, because I'm sure we can do something. If we can't really test it, then I'm sure I can pair up with him and actually see what he's done, and he can explain it to me line by line. What is this code really doing? And then I can just run the model for safety reasons after this implementation has gone in, and make sure my model runs end to end and nothing's blocked it because of this new implementation. So yeah, it's a topic that quite a few testers talk about, and I wouldn't say everything is testable. Sometimes there are some areas which you can't really test, but if you can make a way of testing it, that's thumbs up. That's really good. But make sure you always question this. It's always good to be able to test whatever. If you can't test it, then make sure you can pair up with the developer and understand, why did you do this? How did it impact the product? And would something break if I did something else, like when I'm running my model? So it's super, super important. Because what I've noticed, actually, we've got various data sets as well. So those data sets, we don't want to get rid of them because they actually impact certain features we've implemented. So certain features that I would catch errors with in dataset A, I would not see them in dataset B. So it's super important to make sure you know what's happening.
Oh, absolutely. And last question from Chris,
Yeah.
and thanks so much again for being in, and hopefully we'll see you on the panel discussion later, which
Yeah.
will be a bit more generic. But
Yeah.
Chris also kind of said, is there any great places to get started? I know we talked about Kaggle on the podcast as the Google platform that allows you to kind of get up and get a scratch pad and start doing this kind of stuff. Any other kind of resources that you'd recommend for people to check out to learn more?
I think I really like some courses on Udemy. They're really good. And before I forget, this might be worth reading. This is really good, and it's just heading you to understand more what happens in like AI modeling. So definitely check some courses out. But out of courses and everything, I think you learn the best at the job. So data scientists are your people. Work with them very, very closely.
Wonderful. Well, thanks. And what we'll do is, as you've helped promote the book, for which I know Imran's going to be speaking on Friday, I'll throw in a copy to you, whoever wins tonight's quiz, which will be our session onwards. So if they come high on, and we're going to use Kahoot later. So if you score high, you're going to get a book. We'll get it signed and get it shipped over to you. So thanks so much again for being on, and look forward to speaking to you on the panel discussion in a short while.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. So now I'm going to